Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Central bankers and finance officials from the BRICS nations are meeting in Moscow this week, and the Russian finance minister Anton Siluanov just called for what may be a new gold standard. He says that the IMF and the World Bank no longer operate in the interest of the BRICS nations, and that it is now time to form new institutions that do. The way he describes these institutions, however, suggests that gold will likely play a major role in whatever Russia has planned. And the other shoe could drop as soon as the end of October, so time is short. Of course, any moves to establish a gold-pegged BRICS currency would have huge implications for the gold price, for the silver price, and for anyone who is stacking physical precious metals. So, let's get to it. I'd like to say a big thank you to you for tuning into today's video. If you enjoy it and you get some value from it, please do give it a big thumbs up down below. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel? Buy your gold and silver at SD Bullion. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. Okay, so Russia is hosting these meetings in Moscow this week among the BRICS finance leadership, and this is all part of the lead up to the BRICS conference, which will be occurring at the end of this month in Kazan, Russia. And Russia is chairing the BRICS conference this year, so they're going to set the tone and the agenda. And what they're calling for at these meetings is the creation of new financial institutions to help mitigate political pressure and sanctions from the West. But when we look at the specific wording that the Russian finance minister uses, it becomes clear that this could have some major implications for gold. So first off, Anton Siluanov, the Russian finance minister, he says that the BRICS control 37% of global GDP and that they need to create alternatives to institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, because those institutions, he points out, are not working in the interests of the BRICS nations. But then this specific quote from Siluanov illustrates why this is so important for gold. It is necessary to form new conditions or even new institutions similar to the Bretton Woods institutions, but within the framework of our community, within the framework of BRICS. Bretton Woods, this was an agreement in 1944. It basically shaped the post-World War II global financial order. This is a page from the Corporate Finance Institute, which gives us a brief overview of this agreement. It says here, the agreement involved representatives from 44 nations and brought about the creation of the IMF and the World Bank. But then perhaps more notably and important here is the Bretton Woods Agreement established a system through which a fixed currency exchange rate could be created using gold as the universal standard. Basically, the way this was set up was that following the Second World War, many of the European nations were bankrupted. They were in massive debts. Their infrastructure was damaged significantly. And rather than having every country back up their currency with gold, because the U.S. now had all the gold, they had a lot of the money, they were really the economic victors of the war, the U.S. backed up their dollar with gold, and then the rest of the world went on a dollar standard. Institutions like the IMF and the World Bank were part of this structure. Now, it's important to note that the Bretton Woods Agreement was about 80 years ago, and we've really seen two major shifts in the global financial order. The first was the creation of the Bretton Woods Agreement, and the second was in 1971, when Richard Nixon pulled us off of the gold standard, and that is when the globe went on this totally fiat dollar standard. So initially, the dollar was backed up by gold, and everybody held dollars as their reserve. But then in 1971, due to the fact that we were spending way more money than we actually had, we were beginning this cycle of currency debasement and massive indebtedness, Richard Nixon was forced to temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
And that was about 53 years ago. And now we may be facing yet another major change. And a big aspect of this is the global de-dollarization, which has really been kicked into high gear following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia, when the sanctions and economic warfare really kicked off. As a result of that, this is another statement from the Russian finance minister at these meetings. He says that the dollar and the euro have been reduced to less than 30% of payments in BRICS. So what the BRICS nations have been trying to do thus far is reduce their reliance on the dollar and the euro and transition to a system in which local currencies are used for trade within the organization. And this trend doesn't just date back 2 years, it's just accelerated a lot over the past 2 years. You can see from this chart from Bloomberg that China's utilization of the dollar for cross-border trade has been on the decline, and it recently actually fell below the level of their local currency, the yuan. The yuan has overtaken the dollar in cross-border trade in China, the world's second largest economy and the biggest member of BRICS. And you might recall from a video I published back in 2022 titled Dedollarization and Silver, this document, which I referenced in that video and kind of broke it down and went into it in detail. This is titled Bretton Woods 3. This is by Credit Suisse analyst Zoltan Posar. Now, he says in this document that we are witnessing the birth of Bretton Woods 3, a new world monetary order centered around commodity-based currencies in the East that will likely weaken the Eurodollar system and also contribute to inflationary forces in the West. Now, I'm not going to delve too into this document. You can check out that video. I'll put a link in the description if you want to see more about this. But, looking back now over 2 years, this is looking like a pretty prescient document, if you ask me. And there is a real possibility, I think, that at this BRICS conference, we could see a move in one way, shape, or form to a gold or commodity-backed currency. Now, it might be a low probability event. I mean, there is certainly the possibility that the BRICS conference could just end up being a bit of a nothing burger, that nothing major will be announced or put into effect. However, I think it's important that we still take note of this possibility because even though it may be a lower probability event, the impact of such an event would be so significant that it's still worth being on our radars. This is the report from last month from the TASS Russian news agencies regarding the new financial instruments which may be unveiled at this BRICS summit in Kazan in just a few weeks. And notably, one of the projects that is speculated about in this publication is a currency unit which could be pegged 40% to the value of gold. Now, when you hear reports like this and language coming out of the Russian finance minister at the meeting this week regarding the creation of new Bretton Woods type institutions, I think it should be clear that gold may be a critical component of this new BRICS financial system. And to get a clue as to why the BRICS nations want so badly to involve gold in their currency, we can look at this article from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Now, it's titled, "Here's Why the U.S. No Longer Follows a Gold Standard." And there's a quote in here from Federal Reserve economist David Wheelock, who says, "The U.S. mines a lot of gold, but we're not the biggest producer. The biggest suppliers of gold would have more control over our monetary policy that is under a gold standard, and there's no reason to have it because we can get the advantages of the gold standard and avoid the disadvantages without being on a gold standard." Now, who are the world's biggest gold producers? Well, that would be China in the number 1 position and Russia in the number 2. Now, if you are the world's biggest producers of gold, obviously, then it is advantageous for you if the whole world uses gold as money. It gives you a lot of leverage. You're basically pulling the most money out of the ground. And this is straight out of the mouth of a Federal Reserve economist. This is not Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping talking about precious metals. That could explain why we are hearing reports that Saudi Arabia has been secretly stockpiling gold, like in this headline here from the Jerusalem Post. Saudi Arabia, now a BRICS member, also a member who has recently discussed taking yuan or non-dollar currencies in exchange for oil payments. And it could also explain why China has been building up a massive gold position. Last year, they were the biggest buyer of gold around the world, and the percentage of Chinese reserves in gold has risen to the highest level on record, just under 5%. And there is significant speculation that China may also be secretly stockpiling gold behind the scenes. So this number may actually be much higher than what is being reported here by Bloomberg and the PBOC official data. So there could be big changes for gold afoot even before the end of this month. If a gold-pegged BRICS currency were to be announced, I think that that's clear that that would create significant demand for the precious metals and likely result in significant price appreciation for gold and then also for silver, because basically where gold goes, silver follows. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. But what do you think? Will we see a new gold standard for the BRICS nations unveiled within just a couple of weeks? Do you think that it'll just be a big nothing burger and a lot of hot air? Or maybe something in the middle? And what do you think it'll mean for gold and silver? Leave me a comment down below. to let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.